So, hello again, it's Inigo. Just to conclude with this spring webinar, I would like to talk about one of the main findings that we had in this COOPID project. It could be considered one of the main outcomes from the project and is a brief work that we did about which are the main factors that make the bioeconomy success stories that we studied successful. So, as we commented in previous presentations, for COOPID project, we generate a diverse portfolio of business models that are successful on the EU bioeconomy, specifically when talking about primary producers promoting business models. Some of these success stories were showcased, and then we go deeper on a deeper analysis to understand which factors make these success cases special. What has been important on the generation of this business model to consider them as successful business models, and we found 8. Before to start with the review of these 8 key elements, key factors for the success of these business models, I would like to review with you which success cases we reviewed. So we reviewed in Spain, Oleícola El Tejar, which is an olive oil cooperative that valorizes their residues. Carberry Group in Ireland, a dairy cooperative. Moller Brands, which is a family company based in Denmark, who works in the hemp industry. Then it is not exactly a business model, but an ecosystem, a bioeconomy ecosystem in France, exactly in the Grandes region. We analyze this big ecosystem about biorefinery, who is in this area in France. Then we moved to Bulgaria, when we understood how a greenhouse for the vegetable production works, make the most from the available resources they have. Then we have the Austrian showcase, which is a cooperative working on the pelletization of different biomasses. We have the Greek cooperative Pindos, who is a poultry cooperative. Biogal in Poland, which is a biogas production company that also produces organic fertilizer from the digestate. In Italy, Caviro, which is the main wine producer in Italy, and it is also a cooperative, it's a winery cooperative. The Finnish Forestry Center in Oulu, which is the main actor, a public actor. It is not exactly a business model, but it's kind of management system of best practices for the forestry sector in Finland. And last but not least, Valio, the dairy cooperative, which is the main dairy producer in Finland, who has been visited in September 2022, just to conclude with the COOPID visits. So by analyzing the information that we gather from these business models, we identify 8 success factors. So first I'm going to enlist them, and then we are going to go deeper on each of these success factors. First, we have the increased value of the byproducts and waste streams. This is quite obvious, but it's something to be considered when establish a bio-based business model. Then the circularity of nutrients and the reduction of carbon emissions, highlighting to make them back to primary producers. The renewable energy as a central element of the business model. Most of the business models that we analyze has at some dimension of renewable energy. Then the application of innovative technologies, the access of capital to access to these innovative technologies. We also identified that there are new ways of cooperation on the value chain that establish these value chains. the competences in innovation inside the business model, and last but not least, so this is kind of a special one, is that we identify that cooperatives or cooperation schemes has some advantages when developing a bio-based business model. So let's go to the first one, the increased value of the byproducts and waste streams. So all the selected cases have an overarching goal to make as much value of side streams as possible. All the resources that we got in these business models are valuable, and we should always look for the highest possible output in terms of economy, so to get the best from these side streams or wastes, and at the same time looking for the lowest environmental impact. Then the valorization of these byproducts could be classified according to the triangle we are looking on the screen, where we could find that the higher the cost, the lower the amount produced. So for these big companies, is used to be the valorization of the streams into products like materials or pharma, where you just get a small amount because of the available techniques, but with a really high value. Then if we go a step back, we have bigger amounts of, for example, food and feed application. So these ingredients, potential ingredients for food and feed, to feed animals, we have a lower value but higher amounts of products. And then if we go into the lowest part of the triangle, we have most of the proposals for bioenergy and recycling of nutrients, where we have, for example, composting, bioenergy obtention are the easiest way to valorize the side streams, but it is true that compared with pharma products, for example, it is not that value compared with the pharma or the raw materials. So this is the first factor that we observe. Most of the cases try to get the best from their waste streams according to their current conditions and also according to the raw materials they are managing. So then, if we jump to the second one, which is the circularity, the circulation of nutrients, and to put the carbon back to the primary production sectors. So this, to close the circle, is always the main objective when trying to valorize the byproducts on our systems, especially when we are talking on primary production, because it's always easier to recycle the nutrients, so carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, when we are working with primary producers, because they could put through fertilizers, through carbon sequestration, they are able, because of working on the fields, they are able to put these nutrients back on earth. In most of the cases, this nutrient recycling is linked with biogas production or the composting, and it's the main activity. But in other ones, this circularity is less relevant, but it's always present. It is also true that, for example, when we are talking about the reduction of the carbon emissions in systems like, for example, biorefinery, it's complicated because they are very big systems that involves logistics, transportation, large industries, and sometimes in these cases the gas emission reduction is not enough, and we should start to carry out practices for carbon sequestration that complements this reduction. It's also important to talk about circularity of nutrients in this way. Since the circularity, when talking on primary production sector, also promotes the security the food security in terms of supply and cost reduction, but not regulations don't used to include these circumstances on the regulation. So sometimes it's not fair for some of the systems. Continuing with these key factors, we have the circularity, we have the nutrient recycling. I also mentioned that renewable energies used to have a main role on most of the systems. The obtention of renewable energy used to be adapted to the energy demand of the facility. So for bigger facilities, like for example Oleícola El Tejar or Carberry Group in Ireland, we have quite complex and very effective energy obtention systems. But for the smallest one, like for example the greenhouse of Victor Asenov, are just reduced, or not reduced because they don't have less impact, but they commit with the role which is to just give electric power and heat supply to the greenhouse. So this renewable energy is not required to be huge energy production systems, but just to be adequate to the conditions of the business models. These energy production systems, in addition, used to include this circularity, the circularity of nutrients. So most of them, when valorized into a bioenergy to produce renewable energy, the ash production, so the biomass which is not valorized into energy, this waste doesn't generate a waste, because in most of the occasions this waste is used as fertilizers, directly applied, as we mentioned it before, directly in the fields to put carbon back to the mineral fraction to put again on the fields. And just to conclude with this key factor, it is true that when feedstock cannot promote by themselves the energy supply, the renewable energy supply, other systems that the bioenergy based ones, like photovoltaic, are recommended in order to don't use fuel sources of energy to get the required energy demand. After the three first key factors, we are going to start to talk about the innovation, which is required and is quite linked with the success of the mentioned business models. First, as we mentioned it before, we have the application of innovative technologies, which are mostly mandatory for the correct implementation of bio-based business models. To implement these new valorization lines, we depend of new technologies to get new products. These innovative technologies used to require an intensive effort in terms of team, expertise, investment, always talking about research and development activities in order to achieve the adequate technology for the feedstock and activity we are looking for. Because of these requirements, large companies or cooperatives or organizations with cooperation schemes established have some advantages to implement this, since they already have their own staff with the preparation and the skills to carry out or to acquire these technologies. This is why also an advancing part of the key elements, cooperation is key for the implementation, and we could check this on the successful cases that we found from the projects funded by the European Commission. So how the BBI joint undertaking or programs like Horizon 2020 or Horizon Europe are promoting through the cooperation from different agents to achieve successful technologies and business models. It's also, when talking about innovation and technology, it's also important to highlight that it's more recommended and is more frequent when we study these business models, the incremental innovation models. So to increment from an existing process or from an existing product into small improvements that brings you to a novel product, instead to implement radical innovations. Why are more frequent and why are more linked to success? Because when working in this sense, you can reduce the risk and generate more stable economics in the company. I already advanced somehow, but this is not just about innovation technology, but also about the competences in innovation. It's a common feature, a common characteristic of the studied business models that all of them have the ability to involve agents that to convert a good idea in a business opportunity. So not just to detect the chance from like academia did, but also convert this good idea into a business opportunity. So curiosity, open-mindedness, cooperation are among other values are competences that are really valuable to develop a bio-business model. The innovation could happen directly in the company, but it is also interesting to recognize when the innovation happens in innovation clusters or in other collaborative organizations where the ideas are discussed independently of the circumstances, and then the own members of these clusters are the potential users of these technologies, so for these innovations. And just to remark that innovation, it is not just about these soft skills, it is not just about to have an open-minded or to be curious. Most of the success stories involve high educated staffs. So they involve professionals with backgrounds in research, academia, with long experience on research, and this is something to be into account. So the involvement of PhD and former researchers on the companies really supports to have success when implementing these new business models. But as we mentioned it before, when we were talking about innovative technologies, when we talk about innovative technologies, innovation, it is something quite important, that is the access to the capital, to the financial conditions to fund these required investments that usually are quite relevant to implement these systems. As we mentioned it before, for these large companies or cooperatives, it's easier to achieve this one because they have a specific staff from the innovation department or research department, which are experts on working on these funding opportunities or getting capital. It is also an advantage to work with cooperatively owned companies because they are able to raise capital just among their partners by fees. So we have these experiences, like for example, the Oleikola case, which is a huge cooperative that was able to generate this big factory, showcase it in the project just because of the effort of the members of the cooperative, or the example of the ecosystem in the bioeconomy ecosystem in the Grand East, where the farmer saved the profits from the harvest of 1 year just to build up the biorefinery. So when we work with these big companies, it's always easier to achieve, even if these big companies are composed of smaller pieces like the cooperativists. It is also important to have a good dialogue with the public authorities, because sometimes, in some of the cases, like for example the Grand East one, there is a mutual interest between the private initiative and the public authorities, because the creation of these bioeconomy ecosystems or these new opportunities also generates jobs and development for the region. So by having a good dialogue with the local, national, regional authorities really supports the access to capital when possible directly from public funds. So for these communication networks, the communication to be in networks, the networking, to have a good dialogue with the relevant agents, it's also important to get access to the capital. So we are going to go through the last key factors, which are both focused on cooperation. First, we have the new ways of cooperation in the value chain. We have been talking about cooperation just to talk about the role of cooperation inside the company. But we also detected in different success cases the new models of cooperation beyond the own company are very relevant for the success of our bio-business models. For example, in the case of Victor Asenov, to produce energy, gets the husk, the sunflower husk, from local farmers. So by cooperating with another company, they get the feedstock for the energy production in their own facility. So they are not just impacting in their own company, but in another company that probably are not mainly focused on the production of sunflower husk. We also have the case in Denmark for these Moleru brands with the company Organic Plant Protein, who produce plant-based proteins, and in this case they are using part of this hemp plant to produce flour that is used afterwards to produce vegan burgers. So we have again a cooperation between two companies just to generate a synergy. Or the case of Biogal, which in the end it's a biogas production company that they depend from different feedstocks. They are not focused just in one agri-food waste, but they get food waste from different collaborators, and they also the energy produced by us is also distributed to different actors. So they don't have just one provider and one customer, but different ones. So to find these new ways of cooperation, it's also important to develop the success of the bio-based business model. And also, because this is about new ways of cooperation, but we should not forget the traditional schemes. For example, the grandest bioeconomy ecosystem is a clear case of the successful implementation of the triple helix of innovation, where we could find the government, so this grant is a region like really supporting this ecosystem, the academia that provides the know-how about how to implement this ecosystem, and then the industry, which is in the end the main actor of these systems. And just to conclude with this last one, is about the advantages that has to work in cooperation. This was described in 2019. The European Commission, through a workshop, highlighted the role of cooperatives as key agents for the bioeconomy implementation. First, because they have a really quite relevant impact on some markets. For example, cooperatives owns the 83% of the Dutch agricultural market. They also the 60% of the Swedish forestry market is managed by cooperatives, and the cooperative size allows in most of the cases to achieve this minimum of scale to develop certain value chains. So this is, for example, the case of Carberry or Valio or Oleícola El Tejar, that because of the union of farmers, each farmers by them separately they will not be able to develop the value chain by their own, but because of the cooperation between different farmers, they achieve this economy of scale that make possible to establish factories as the Carberry one, or the Pintos one, or the Oleícola El Tejar one. It is also important because the joint research results obtained by the cooperative as a general company could benefit several primary producers. So if they develop know-how that could be profitable for the primary producers, this could be useful not just by researching one by one, but their own cooperative produce results and impacts. This brief presentation is based on one of the deliverables published by the project. So if you go deeper on the details that I give during this last presentation, you have the deliverable 4.2 called Success Story Factors for Bio-Based Business Models in our website. We also have some infographics regarding the role of primary producers, regarding the role of cooperatives, the different hot topics on the bioeconomy. So you could go to our website and check for further materials. And that was all. Thank you very much for attending. See you next time. Goodbye.